I'm going to bring in Eric Eggers. Eric is a vice president of research at the Government Accountability Institute. And Eric, you're on with the Jane Meister and me. Eric, this fraud in Minnesota, I mean, it's beyond the pale what we're seeing. You can't even make this stuff up. Like hundreds and hundreds of daycare centers with no children in it, food banks with no food, feed 1,000 people a day. They don't even feed anybody. They just cash the checks and get the direct deposits and run off with the money. It's just unbelievable. How deep is this, Eric?
It's quite deep. I think Jane is correct that she wants to see what the campaign money contribution cycle looks like. There's been reports that some of the people involved in some of this fraud have donated up to $10,000 to Tim Walz's campaign. But Jane, I think that the money trail is going to be more interesting when you look at the fact that, as you noted, like this fraud is uncapped. There's as many as 125 million meals that they pretended existed and then just kind of like went away. Minnesota, unlike Ohio, has a far more permissive system of qualification. Basically, it's an honor system. It's basically self-attestation. But it was aided and abetted by a very compliant Biden administration. The person that was in charge of Medicaid at the end of the Biden era wrote a letter to states saying, hey, we don't care if you suspect fraud is happening. You're not allowed to remove people from the rolls. And so it's basically a problem of incentives. People saw these numbers spike. You would think if the amount of money we're spending on autism funding goes from 6 million to 192 million, hey, do we have like a public health crisis on our hands, right? Is autism contagious? Instead, they gave each other awards for being so efficient at passing out money, regardless of the veracity of the claims.
Jane, why did they allow this to happen? What was the incentive here for the Biden administration to look the other way and allow this fraud to fester and grow? Was it just about winning votes in Minnesota? Is that all they cared about was power?
I think that's an element of it. I do have some major concerns that this was a kickback scheme.
Really?
I do. And well, I mean, as Eric just suggested, you have federal dollars flowing into these, or these businesses who are then turning around and donating to Minnesota candidates and like Tim Walz. I'm very suspicious of it. Obviously I'm not the investigator. I don't have any proof. But I think that this was a massive amount of money. Where did the money go? And, we're going to have a trial. This, as I said, there are 82 people who have been indicted. And so I'm very interested, and I hope they go to trial, because I think the American people just deserved full disclosure as to what actually happened with this money.
Eric Eggers with us. Eric, VP Research at the Government Accountability Institute. You just heard what Jane said. No proof, but Jane's very instinctive. She runs a very big business in Ohio. She's part of the state General Assembly. She's a state committee woman. I trust her instincts. Her instincts say this was kickback money back into Democrat socialist campaigns in Minnesota. What do you think about that, Eric?
Hey, the Jane Meister's instincts are good enough for me, What I would say is that they're actually, Jane's instincts are actually backed up by what investigator general reports and audits have suggested as far back as 2018, 2019. That's actually part of what makes this fraud so scandalous. The feeding program, as you noted, is the first thing that became public. Then that's what kicked off these investigations into the housing scheme, the autism schemes, and everything else. But the feeding program, they started getting reports that the vendors in charge of the feeding scandal were actually requesting kickbacks. And so like the FBI is sending notices to these state agencies saying, listen, we're getting reports that there's requests for kickbacks. You should just be aware of this. And so the state agencies, as they should, to their credit, start sniffing around. And that's where, if you've heard this leaked audio of the Attorney General Keith Ellison meeting with these Somali business people, the Somali business people are saying to Keith Ellison, look, these state agencies are coming after us, and we have evidence of waste, fraud, and abuse on their part, and they're only coming after us because we're Somali. So can you help us? And the Attorney General, instead of saying, hey, maybe these state agencies have reasons to be sniffing around, he says, of course, I got your back. Sometimes it just takes a letter from the Attorney General to get these white agencies to back off. And then luckily a month later, the feds raid these agencies and put a stop to this scandal. But absolutely right. Kickbacks were a part of this business model in at least the feeding programs. And that's just one element of it. I would just say this, John. Tim Walz has resigned, and that's been the latest news to kind of further this story. But I would say the fraud, in my opinion, doesn't just exist solely within the welfare programs. To me, this has been a story for 2 months. So why did Tim Walz resign over the weekend? Harmeet Dillon with the Attorney General's office wrote a letter to the Secretary of State in Minnesota requesting not just to look at the welfare fraud rolls, but actually to look at the voter rolls. So on Friday, she said, we want to take a look at all your same-day voter registrations because, as you noted, voting is a key component to this business model. Democrats look the other way because you don't get elected statewide as a Democrat without the Somali support, and that includes registering these people. And if the welfare programs are fraudulent, and we know they are at historic levels, I think it makes sense that the voter rolls would have significant problems as well. The Department of Justice finally took steps to look into them on Friday. Tim Walz resigns over the weekend. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Eric Eggers, let's get back to the Jane Meister. So Jane, this is interesting. Eric putting together same-day vote registration and voter fraud with the overall $16 billion fraud or whatever it is going on in Minnesota. Tie that together for us, Jane.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Again, I don't want to get over my skis, and I have no proof of any of this. But if you think about how the money flow would happen, you have federal dollars going into these agencies to these individuals. Then they can, and they're not spending that money on buying the food or providing the child care or providing the home health care. So what are they doing with the money? Are they then donating that money to campaigns? Are they using it for other agendas, political or otherwise? And so that's going to be the real question. I have full faith in Harmeet Dillon. She and I served on the RNC previously together. She is a bulldog. She will not let up. And she's the perfect person to go after this. And so I think there's more to come. It's what saddens me the most is that the people, the family that's making $75,000 a year, they're trying to send their kids to childcare and they can't afford it because of this kind of abuse. And the taxpayers who have been paying through the nose that they are providing our taxpayer dollars to this kind of fraud scheme. It's outrageous.
So, Eric, how would the voter fraud work? Like, walk us through that. This is fascinating. I hadn't heard this.
Well, Minnesota has historically and famously one of the more lenient forms of voting. In fact, if you remember when Al Franken was elected to the Senate, it was a recount. It ended up being settled over about 300 ballots, and it was later reported that there was significant issues about the mishandling of ballots. They found some in trunks at a number that was much higher than the margin. So many people believe that Al Franken, who, by the way, was the deciding vote in the Obamacare vote, was elected because of voter fraud. But Minnesota has something known as vouching. So you don't have to have ID. You don't have to have proof of residency. But if you have someone else who is a registered voter who says, I vouch for that person, they can vouch for up to 8 different voters. And so, Minnesota, their Secretary of State has fought in reforms. Ohio's led on this. Ohio's implemented voter ID. Ohio's, cleaned up their voter rolls. Minnesota has fought moves like that at every turn, and it remains a very permissive state, lots of red flags about voting. And so when you have populations that can do same-day voting, Tim Walz supported pop-up same-day voter registration sites on a number of occasions. So major red flags, and that's one of the reasons why Harmeet Dillon is wanting to take a look at these rolls. And once a name gets on a voter roll that shouldn't be there, it's very easily exploited. The city of New York famously did in an undercover investigation. They sent detectives to try to cast ballot on behalf of 63 different names that shouldn't have been on voter rolls. They were successful 61 times. So it's once you get the names on the rolls that shouldn't be there, they're easily exploitable. And I think that's one of the things the Department of Justice is trying to look into.
So, Jane, let me get this straight. So I'm a Somalian refugee, whatever you want to call it. I got to the United States. I'm not a citizen. I don't have papers. I'm not legal. I'm not a voter because I'm not a citizen. Yet I go in the vote, and I got 8 of them coming with me. Now, one person is a voter, and they're like, I'm going to vouch for these other 8 people. They all live in the area. They're all good, even though they're all illegals. They're not citizens. They can't vote, and they just sign up and vote that day. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds exactly. This is classic machine politicking. You get your 10, 12 people, you get them registered to vote, you tell them they're showing up, they're voting, they're going to vote this certain way. It's the
And if
classic
you vote this
machine.
way, you get money, you get welfare, you get benefits, you
That's the
get
assumption.
part of the fraud, part of it's walking around money because we're trying to figure out. One of the things that Eric said is, where this, let's say the number is 15 billion, right? We don't know for sake of argument. Where did it go? Where is it? It's a lot of money, Eric.
Well, I'll tell you, and this is actually more troubling than money ending up in the campaign coffers of Tim Walz or Keith Ellison or Ilhan Omar. But Minneapolis is famous for, because of the Somali network, operating a network of what's called hawalas. It's basically money laundering. And the 1 year that they have data for people declaring cash that they were taking out of the Minneapolis airport, this was reported recently. I think it was like $1 million in cash, but this is a known network. Minneapolis, because of the Somali community, is a known network of money that leaves Minneapolis. It goes to Seattle and it ends up with cash in suitcases overseas. And it's been reported and proven that a lot of this money ends up, unfortunately, in accounts linked to terrorist organizations. So, I mean, fraud at home leads to terror abroad, which only makes us less safe. You've heard people say recently, the border secure, the country's not. We got 18,000 people, according to U.S. officials, with known or suspected terrorist links. So it's a real problem. It's not just like a fun, cute, hey, the money's missing, where'd it go? It's, no, the money went to people who want to do harm to this country. And that's another reason why you have to take it incredibly seriously.
Jane, you think about this. I'm 67, right? You work hard your whole life. You work your tail off. You try to follow the rules. You pay your taxes. You don't pay your taxes. You get your paycheck is garnished or whatever, and they take your home, right? A lot of us, like me, went through 2008, wiped out, homeless, living in a car. You build back up. You work 15, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, trying to raise a family and try to do the right thing. And then you find out, billions of dollars of your tax money has been stolen by these fraudsters, and you got politicians basically looking the other way, or part of it, or benefiting from it. I mean, how do you look the average taxpayer in the eye, Jane?
Yeah, and I said it's heartbreaking, and no wonder there is some anger in the American people. They want their government to function and to put them first, and to not. The corruption has got to stop, and I think Eric makes a very good point. This money should not be going into the hands of terrorists, let alone corrupt politicians. And so you can see how the average American citizen feels left behind and lost in the shuffle because of these fraudsters in the game playing and the corruption. And I can relate that they have significant anger towards the system.
It's unbelievable, Jane. I mean, you're a businesswoman. You and your husband own a number of car dealerships. You built your business, and
No, no, my husband, I don't own a car dealership. It's the Timken Bearing Company, but I don't run it.
yeah, but you're part of it,
I'm
right?
just a lawyer.
I mean, you're a lawyer, but look, your family has worked hard. Whenever you own a business and you build a business, anybody that's done that, like Ann and I mean, we work. I mean, I don't even want to tell you how many hours you have to work a day when you build something like this, and then just see this money just basically, gone out the door to these fraudsters and the people that don't even live here. I mean, they just come in, and 87% of them on welfare. I mean, this is so screwed up. It's like, ever ask yourself, like, how the hell do we even get here? Right, Eric? It's unbelievable.
Well, I'll tell you how we got here, and I think it's a warning sign for the rest of the country. So unlike Ohio, which, by the way, my wife's family lives in the Columbus, Ohio area, so a big fan of the state. But, you have both parties have a legitimate political presence in that state. That's not been the case in Minnesota. You've had one party rule in the state of Minnesota for the last 2 decades. A Republican has not won statewide since 2006. And unfortunately, the person who was in charge of that party for much of those 2 decades is a guy named Ken Martin. He was in charge of the Democrat Farm Labor Party for the last 15 years. He's not in charge of Democrat.
What about that? Yeah, Eric, you're like Johnny Appleseed here, seeding everything. Jane, I forgot about that. Ken Martin, the Democratic chair, ran their party. Is he involved in this, Jane? Potentially,
Who knows?
right? I mean, this guy
He's
ran.
gonna have to answer
This guy
that
ran
question.
their party. He probably had to have some knowledge because they had to cobble together all these Somalia fraud voters, and somehow, and where did this money go? And he's chairman of the DNC. This is going to be interesting. Guys, we're out of time. I want to thank the Jane Meister for being with us. Jane, thank you, as always, for your candor and your truth and clarity. Thank you, Jane. People want to follow you, Jane. Where do they go?
Jane Timken, OH.
Jane Timken, OH. Jane, thanks for being with us. Also want to thank Eric Eggers. Eric, thanks for your great work in this Minnesota fraud, following it. Where do people go to follow you, Eric?
I do a podcast with Peter Schweitzer, which they can find at thedrilldown.com. And they can find me on Twitter at Eric_Eggers.
All right. Jane and Eric, thank you for being with us. Jane Meister, always an honor to have you, Jane. We're going to be right back. Keep it right here, the John Fredericks Media Network. Trucking the Truth.